Cornell professor called the October 7th attack exhilarating. A Columbia professor called it awesome. A Yale professor called it an extraordinary day. More than 30 Harvard students signed a letter claiming that Israel was, quote, entirely responsible for the attack. A pro-Hamas student group at University of Virginia called Hamas terrorists Palestinian resistance fighters. And remember, this was all before Israel had seriously retaliated. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran. Just look at what's going on in these little Gazas. These criminals are chanting eliminationist slogans like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and globalize the Intifada. At Stanford, they wore Hamas headbands. At Princeton, they flew the Hezbollah flag. At Harvard, they ripped down the Stars and Stripe and replaced it with the Palestinian flag. At George Washington University, they called for the final solution and posted signs saying they wouldn't leave until Jews go back to their real homes. And look at some of the consequences. At Columbia, a rabbi had to tell students that the university was no longer safe for Jews. At UCLA, Hamas sympathizers blocked Jewish students from attending classes and assaulted Jewish students. USC canceled its graduation out of fear of pro-Hamas riots. It's time to stop these anti-Semitic pro-Hamas mobs today. And if liberal college administrators won't take action, the mayors and the governors of these campuses should. And so should Joe Biden. When will the president himself, not his mouthpieces, condemn these hate-filled little Gazas? President Biden needs to denounce Hamas's campus sympathizers without equivocating about Israelis fighting a righteous war of survival. The State Department needs to yank the visas of foreign students in these little Gazas, and DHS needs to deport them. The Justice Department should investigate the funding sources behind these little Gazas, and the Department of Education needs to withhold funding for colleges that won't protect the civil rights of their Jewish students. Instead, Joe Biden is putting more pressure on Israel these days than he is on Hamas itself or on the pro-Hamas chapters on America's campuses. But I guess that's what we should expect from the leader of a Democratic Party that has let its anti-Semitic elements fester and grow for years. Another 4 years for Joe Biden means another 4 years of little Gazas all across America. And that's something I suspect the American people will keep in mind this November. Senator Cornyn?
Protests are nothing new in our country. They are constitutionally protected by the First Amendment, but it's also very clear that that these institutions can regulate the exercise of those First Amendment rights based on time, manner, and place restrictions, neutral criteria. But as you've seen since October the 7th, the line between protesting and rioting has been crossed time and time again on college campuses across the country. Places like Columbia and Yale, some of the most elite, privileged institutions in America, pro-Hamas rioters have taken over buildings, threatened Jewish students, and prevented students from pursuing the very reason they're there, which is their education. I suggest that these administrations take notes from my friend UT Austin President Jay Hartzell, who has taken swift action to break up demonstrations before things turn violent. Yesterday, the University of Texas in Austin announced that nearly half of those arrested on Monday had no affiliation with the University of Texas. In other words, the mainstream media would have you understand or would suggest that these are somehow students who are outraged at what's happening in the Middle East. But in fact, in Texas, and I bet the same number holds in other parts of the country, that nearly half of those are not students at these institutions. What they did find when they arrested some of these outside agitators was guns, mallets, and other weapons that were confiscated by law enforcement. These obviously are people not interested in peaceful protests. These are funded by many of the same outside groups like George Soros, other dark money groups that support Antifa and other riots that we've seen in our American cities in the past few years. The right to peaceful protest is a fundamental right, as I started out by saying, but it does not grant any of us the ability to damage property, threaten the safety of others, or violate the rules of our university campuses. Senator Lankford.
Tom, thanks for pulling this together and for making it so clear what we're trying to accomplish. Every university and every student has the right to be able to speak their mind, to be able to test out new ideas. It's the nature of being on a college campus to be able to both speak out and to be able to think through different things. But when you're talking about screaming at Jewish students and rabbis saying no longer is this university a safe place for you to be, it violates the very principles that all these universities supposedly stand for. Literally in these locations where Jewish students are being told it's not safe for you to be there anymore, I can't imagine any other group on campus that university officials would say it's no longer safe for you to be here. These are the individuals that should have the right to be able to go to their education and to be able to speak their own mind, yet they're being intimidated and harassed, screamed at with words of genocide, have a protest sign held in front of them that says resistance by all means necessary. Everyone understands what that means, but that group actually holds that up. That is including violence, including October the 7th. Listen, we're a nation that prides ourselves on the right to be able to speak out, but we're also a nation that says you cannot go and intimidate someone else in the process. When law is broken on that, then law needs to be enforced. If you do not enforce criminal activity, then you'll get more criminal activity. And we're seeing it in some of these privileged universities where they're allowing individuals to be able to come and to be able to clearly violate the law and then assume it's not going to get worse and worse and worse. It is, and it has, and it will continue to, till we actually have clear parameters of, yes, you can speak your mind, yes, you can say a dumb thing, but no, you can't intimidate other people. And again, for universities that pride themselves on creating safe places on their campus to literally create environments where they know they're going to thrive in crime and they're going to have people take over buildings and try to relive the glory days of the 1960s in protests, what they're really doing is continuing to intimidate other students, and they know it, and they're winning. When graduations get canceled, when classes have to move, the violent protesters, they're actually winning the day. So this is up to universities. Quite frankly, we've all been very clear, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition that the State Department has used for years to be able to define anti-Semitism, the Department of Education has refused to use, and many of these university presidents have refused to use and left an ambiguous definition saying, of course you can speak out against Israel. Of course you can. But even in the IRA definition, you can disagree with the Israeli government, but you can't call for genocide. That moves into anti-Semitism, and that should be something that we actually speak out on and make very clear on every single campus.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Senator Cotton, for organizing this important discussion on a very disturbing issue. What we're seeing on college campuses is total chaos. And we all know that universities have an obligation to provide every single one of their students a safe learning environment. That's not happening. We saw it again on the news last night. These are violent protests. This is occupying university buildings. This is breaking the law. And then you add in the vileness of looking at other students and making disgusting anti-Semitic statements to those students, not allowing them to participate on their own campus in their educational endeavors. This is beyond the pale. And I think many of us recognize that. Not many of us are speaking up. And we certainly don't hear it from most of the elected officials. We certainly don't hear people speaking up on the university campuses. We certainly don't see any kind of strong positive action by university officials. Instead, we see chaos. We see vileness. We see hate. We see growing division. But there's one group, well, there's really a couple groups, that are supportive of this. Hamas is a terrorist organization. They kill babies. They kill old people. They still have Americans held as hostages in Gaza. Report that. Report that. And now we see these actions on campus, which Hamas supports. They're endorsing these protests. We see the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. He's publicly applauded the growing number of protests, the growing number of encampments that have sprung up on college campuses. He celebrates the flying of Hezbollah's flag in streets in the United States. Let's be clear. Do we see Iran or Hamas supporting protests
Here.
in their jurisdiction? No, we don't see them supporting it. In fact, we see them cracking down on any kind of protest. Any kind of protest. And they have been criticized by the Human Rights Watch for those actions. So let's understand what's happening here in the United States. What's happening is a growing anti-Semitism. What's happening is chaos on college campuses, not free speech, but criminal activity and violence. And it's time that we demand that students, all students, are protected in this country and that they have their rights protected as well. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Deb.
Now I get to hit him.
You get to hit me. You can get me upside the head. Knock me in the next week. What we're seeing at some of our college campuses is a rule by the mob. That's what many of you, not all of you, but many of you would call a threat to democracy if it were being perpetuated by Republicans. Democrats seem to be able to do it without consequence. That's point one. Point two, we shouldn't paint with too broad a brush. Some of our universities have done a good job. I'll mention three. Vanderbilt, Tulane, and the University of Florida. They have done a good job in dealing with this rule by the mob because of their leadership. The presidents of those three universities are passionate advocates of free speech. They understand that the Constitution protects free speech against government, but it does not protect disruptive behavior. And they understand that the First Amendment to the Constitution makes a distinction between speech and behavior. And it's not complicated. You don't have to be Oliver Wendell Scalia to figure that out. All you have to do is read the document. And so I want to thank them. I think the President of Columbia could learn a lot from them, an awful lot. Point three, I think much of the problem comes from members, some members, not all, but some members of these universities' faculty. There are members of the faculty at some of these universities who believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to kill Jews. They do. Now, this is America. You're entitled to believe what you want. It may be an evil thought, but you're entitled to believe it. You're not entitled to act on it. And many of these professors, not all of them, not at all universities, but many of these professors, instead of celebrating their universities as a diverse place of diversity and ideas, they are convinced they are right, and they want to punish people who disagree with them. And that's a big part of the problem. Final point, President Biden could stop this stuff on a dime. On a dime. How can I put this? It just goes to show you that even old people can suck. Okay? All he would have to do is pick up the phone and call the president of Columbia University quietly and say, Madam President, how you doing? Listen, I don't have a lot of time, and I know you're busy. You've got 14 days to get control of your campus, or you're not getting any more federal money. Now, she will pounce on that like a ninja. But Joe Biden hadn't done that. And President Biden is not going to do that. And it's not just because even older people can suck. He's not going to do that because of the raw gut politics, and you know it, and I know it. President Biden is scared to death to alienate the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. And he has read that new CNN poll, just came out, that said that 52% of likely voters, a CNN poll said 52% of likely voters will never, under any circumstances, on God's good green earth, vote for Joe Biden. 52%. 52% will vote for the guy who salts the French fries at McDonald's before they will vote for Joe Biden. And he knows that. And that's why he is doing, or in this case, not doing, what he's not doing at these universities. And you should call it for what it is. Rule by mob. Rule by mob. A belief in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to kill Jews. And it's wrong.
So going home to my state, there's quite a few Jewish families that have their kids in some of these schools up north. And I think most of them are having to rethink the safety of their kids. I've talked to some individuals in my state that are at these schools, and they've been for months now scared to death for their safety. So what you see that's going on in places like Columbia University is just, it's un-American, it's disturbing, and it's completely unfair. You know, we send our kids off to school, we expect them to be safe. Expect them to learn something, build relationships, and when they finish, be able to get a job. We don't expect them to be worried about whether they're going to get beat up. Their Star of David necklace is going to be ripped off, any of these things. But we've got university presidents and university faculty that are just wimps. Just wimps. They just cower to this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic crowd, and it's crazy. These individuals that believe in what Hamas is doing, why don't they go live in Gaza for a while? Get out of this country. If you don't like this country, you don't like the way we run the country, get out of it. Go to Gaza. See what it's like. See what it's like to live under the rule of Hamas. Now, let's remember what they did. They beheaded babies. They raped girls. They burned people alive. They shot people point blank just for one simple reason. They're Jews. That's what they did. It's as simple. They did that. So if you go protest in favor of them, you support those actions. The president won't say anything because he's worried about losing any votes. He's fine with getting the pro-Hamas crowd to vote for him. He believes he can't take a chance of losing any votes because he is so unpopular. Now here's what needs to happen. Number one is we need to stop funding these universities. I have a bill that says Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campus Act and Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And what we do is stop funding it. Just stop right now. I mean, why should a university that spews hatred and anti-Semitism get any of our federal dollars? Number two is if you're faculty or if you're in leadership at a university and you're not willing to stand up, quit. Let's get somebody who cares about Jews, cares about all the students, make sure they're safe. If you're a student and you're at one of these universities and you spew hatred and anti-Semitic, you need to be expelled. You should be never able to go to that university, in my opinion, any university in the country. And then if you're a donor, if you're a volunteer at any of these universities like Columbia, then stop. Do you want to spend your money given to people that just have hatred just because somebody has a different religion than them? This is disgusting. I hope all these universities get held accountable for their anti-Semitic acts and the leaderships being such wimps to protect their students.
Nice, thank you, Rick. And thank you, Senator Cotton, for organizing today. This is an incredibly important topic. And what we saw on Monday, as a number of my colleagues have already discussed, this mob that is taking over the campus in Columbia. We saw on Monday pro-Hamas protesters hold facility workers hostage. This is the United States of America, where that is wrong. Okay, that is wrong. We see these pro-Hamas protesters falling in line with Iran, one of our top adversaries whose proxies are still holding Americans hostage in Gaza. Anti-Semitic violence shouldn't be on American soil, and yet we're seeing it at all of these liberal colleges and universities. We've seen over 50 encampments pop up. As Senator Cotton mentioned, little Gazas, they're popping up. Students are wreaking havoc, and because of that, they must be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. We also know that there are college professors that are engaging in this activity. We have outside paid people that are coming into campuses and promoting this type of nonsense and violence. And these college administrators are just simply poo-pooing it away. They continue to foster and encourage these activities. And you know what? The Biden administration has failed to stop it. Where are the liberals calling out the violence, calling out the no longer peaceful protests? So I have a good friend who is a liberal Jew. Liberal Jew. Gives to progressives, gives to liberals. Had never given to a conservative. And about a month ago, he came to me and he said, you know what? Who is standing up for the Jewish people? Who's standing up for Israel? Said, you know who it is? It's conservative Christians. That's who's standing up for the Israelis. That's who's standing up for the Jewish people across the United States. This administration refuses to call it out. And when we have college students at these liberal universities like Columbia, like UCLA, that are promoting Hamas. Let's go back to October 7th, folks, and talk about Hamas. They are supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization that raped innocent women, that killed babies, that drug elderly men and women into Gaza and abused them. Where is this okay? And why are we celebrating that on American soil? I remember when I was working with Senator Dianne Feinstein on the Violence Against Women Act. Most of my Democratic friends supported that. Violence against women is not okay. Where are those same individuals today? Where are the members of Congress decrying the violence that has occurred against women by Hamas? Instead, we see them celebrating it. Tables are turning, folks. The tables are turning. What these students are celebrating today and trying to incite violence against Jews on American soil today, that's not okay. And we need to speak out against it. The universities need to put an end to this now. If they don't, they should kiss their federal funding goodbye. Just as Senator Kennedy said, we shouldn't support that as a federal government. It goes against everything that we stand for. We shouldn't support them with our dollars. The donors should withdraw their funding. And you know what? I'm going to go a step further. Businesses across the United States, when they see that little Harvard diploma, UCLA, Columbia, those businesses, maybe they should hang a sign out that says, graduates need not apply. They need not apply. So presidents, you better get a handle on what's going on your colleges and universities, because it is absolutely unacceptable behavior. And I think we, as elected representatives of our constituencies, need to ensure that federal dollars are not going to these institutions.
Right. Thanks, Joni. Certainly this is a time for moral clarity and leadership. Moral clarity and leadership. And those are in such short supply in the White House and at our university campuses. You know, our universities were the leaders, the cheerleaders, the promoters of DEI. DEI has taken over Comp 1 classes and Econ 101 classes and Psych 1 classes, and all the way through your master's thesis, our universities are just dominated by this DEI theme. And what I sit there and wonder today is, how does a university that promotes DEI also promote anti-Semitism? How do you square that circle? How can you do both? How can you promote DEI, preach that to your kids, your students, and then you wake up one day and allow anti-Semitism to go on in your particular university? Could you imagine being on a university today, and wherever you see a sign that says Jews or Zionism or Israel, and then of course there's some negative slogan with that, if you would insert another ethnic group, another religion, then that would be considered a terrorist crime. The FBI would be there investigating that crime. The FBI would be shutting down your university, perhaps. You know, I'm just reminded of what happened in the Holocaust, where if we allow them to go after the Jews, they're going to come after you next. That's why this is so important. This is why it's so important that we just not talk the talk, but we walk the walk. And in this country, we don't allow hatred and we don't allow violence against other groups because of their ethnicity, because of their religion. I also thought a lot this week about how did we get here? How did we get to these riots? And I still think that we are living in a culture of lawlessness created by Joe Biden. It started with an open border, totally against the law. There's no laws on our border right now. He's basically proposed and allowed cashless bail to go on. We see these smash and grabs go on. It can defund the police. And we turn our heads against violent riots that we saw in 2020, and now we're seeing today. We turn our heads to violence and people that are breaking laws right now. You know, there's a rot in our universities. There's a rot in the White House, and there's a rot in this country to allow this to go on. I think about this moral clarity. I think about leadership, and I often go back and say, Well, is this the first time this ever happened in this country? Well, no, it's not. And I go back to Governor Ronald Reagan, what he did in a similar situation, and what President Eisenhower did in a similar situation as well. Where's the moral clarity and the leadership from our university presidents as well as the President of the United States? And I think the last question I ask myself today is why? Why is the university presidents and why is this president turning his head away from these violent crimes that are going on? Why is this president wanting to bring in tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 refugees from Gaza? It's because he is catering to a handful of votes in Michigan. He's totally politically driven rather than doing the right thing. He has no moral clarity. He's a political beast. That's all he cares about is re-election rather than doing the right thing. And here we are today with a lot of moral rot in the White House and our universities. And I think what you're hearing from the folks here today is we're going to stand up and fight against this. So the bad news is when you're at the end of this ladder, you got to stay and watch Tom answer the questions.
Now, to stay and watch me defer to you, Roger. We will take your questions now, if any.
Senator, thank you. What would you like to see Leader Schumer do over in the Senate? What do you make of the action the House is going to take today on their anti-Semitism?
Well, Senator Schumer, like Joe Biden, should stop equivocating between Israel fighting a righteous war for survival and all these pro-Hamas sympathizers on campuses in these little Gazas. For example, when he meddled 2-3 weeks ago calling for new elections in Israel. Maybe Israelis think we should have new elections in New York. Second, I suspect the House of Representatives is going to pass a law today adopting the international definition of anti-Semitism. That's a bill that we should promptly bring to the floor and pass over here as well. Those are just a couple examples. I don't know, Senator Marshall, Senator Ernst, if you have anything else.
The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism includes anti-Zionism, and some people would argue that anti-Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would submit that some people would be very wrong about that. It's just an example of how Israel is held to a unique standard in the world, not just by, say, the United Nations or the International Criminal Court, but by Joe Biden and other Democrats here in the United States. If you demand something of Israel that you don't demand of every other nation, if you threaten their leaders with arrest warrants, if you build these little Gazas on campuses to protest what Israel is doing, you don't do it against, say, Bashar al-Assad for what he's done to his own people, or what Hamas has done to the Arabs living in Gaza, then that is a double standard. That is the definition of anti-Semitism. So anti-Zionism does belong in that definition.
Yeah. I learned so much in college, and one of the things I learned on a bus trip from El Dorado, Kansas to San Angelo, Texas for the national track meet is I learned a lot about folks that were a different skin color than I was. And it was the first time in my life I was in the minority. A long, long bus ride. But what I learned is that the people that are being discriminated against get to define what's insulting and what's not insulting. That we don't get to define that. So if my Jewish friends feel insulted when the term Zion is used, which it is, it's another term for being pro-Israel in a lot of ways as well. So I wouldn't be mincing differences there.
This is actually a very good follow-up to what Senator Marshall said. Congresswoman Jayapal yesterday was asked, quote, what would your message be to a Jewish student who doesn't feel safe on their own campus right now? She replied saying, it is really important to educate yourself about what is anti-Semitic and is not anti-Semitic, and then said there are things that are being called anti-Semitic that are not anti-Semitic, if you could just react to that.
Joni, you want to?
I would just say anytime a person feels threatened, then they are being threatened. It's just that simple. I don't know that she can define it. I think the person that feels threatened certainly could define it.
And I think when you have Jewish students who have to live through these little Gaza encampments where pro-Hamas sympathizers are saying, go back to your real home, or calling for a final solution, or spray painting swastikas on your campus, there's a little question that those Jewish students justifiably feel intimidated and harassed, and that college administrators are not doing their job to protect the civil rights of those Jewish students.
I just got to add one more comment. It kind of makes my blood boil. You know, I'm very sensitive as an obstetrician to women getting every opportunity that guys have. And one of my frustrations, whether I'm here or back home, is mansplaining. And a woman will feel insulted because they're getting mansplained to them. And you would ask the man and say, well, I didn't mean any harm here. Well, he doesn't get to decide what man-explaining is and what it's not. And here's a lady, a good friend of mine you're talking about, that she gets to explain to Jewish people when they shouldn't feel insulted. And if you feel insulted, you should educate yourself. I think that's a total cop-out. I'm just, that really disturbs me. Again, we've all been in those situations. If you feel intimidated, if you feel like people are hating on you, it doesn't mean I get to react in a violent way against it, but how you feel is not determined by the person that's doing the persecution, right? Yeah, very bad.
Respectfully, Senator, do you really think that every student there hates Israel and supports Hamas? Don't you think that many students and American people just don't want to be more Palestinian?
Who are you with? I'm sorry?
Sorry?
Who are you with?
So every student in these little Gazas is either violating the law or violating campus rules. They have a right, if they want to go out and make fools of themselves and protest on behalf of Hamas if they're American citizens. But they don't have a right to build little Gazas in violation of the laws, committing trespass, committing disorderly conduct, in many cases committing felonies through burglary or destruction of property. That is what they do not have the right to do. And yes, whenever you're saying go back to your real home, or painting swastikas on campuses, or flying the Hezbollah flag, or wearing a Hamas headband, then you are not protesting Israel's conduct of their righteous war of survival. You are sympathizing with Hamas.
And I would remind you, too, that at Columbia, there were 3 maintenance workers that were barricaded into a building and not allowed to leave.
Yeah, and,
that's not okay, right?
And regardless of what their feelings are, these students' feelings are, they're breaking the law. It has not, when they're keeping other students from going to school, when they're preventing graduation from happening, they're breaking the law. And we should not encourage them to keep breaking the law and teach them how not to be good citizens. I absolutely respect their voice, but there's a right way to protest and there's a wrong way to protest. And they're infringing on the other students' rights by preventing a normal day from happening. I couldn't imagine my son or daughter at Kansas State University at KU and not being able to go to school today for a lot of reasons, let alone miss their graduation. I think that's just a horrible scenario right now. And it's the wrong thing to teach our young adults.
I think we've got to go vote on a doubtless unqualified judicial nominee. So last question.
Back to the Jewish students that feel threatened, what's your message to them, and what would you advise them to do on an individual level?
Well, first off, one of the reasons why we had this press conference, while all of us have been speaking out on this issue, is to try to encourage these college administrators to take charge of their own campuses and to protect the rights of these Jewish students. And for that matter, any student who just wants to study for final exams and finish the semester in peace without having little Gaza disrupting them 24 hours a day. Second, a lot of these universities are going to face massive lawsuits. Like look at UCLA, where you have Jewish students who are being blocked from entering their classrooms by a bunch of pro-Hamas radicals wearing masks and kepias, like it's some scene out of the 1930s in Germany. So a lot of these students should be consulting with a lawyer, because by the time this is all said and done, they may have buildings on these campuses named after them. And they shouldn't hesitate. They shouldn't hesitate to go to the local authorities as well. If the administrators on campus won't protect them, then they have every right to go to the local authorities and ask for their protection as well. Just a few things that they should do. Most important, they should know that all of these pro-Hamas fanatics in Little Gaza may be getting a lot of attention now, but the vast majority of normal, sane, patriotic Americans support them, not Hamas.
Yes, and they also need to go to the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, because obviously this is a Title VI violation. These Jewish students are not allowed to participate in daily activities to be educated by institutions that are receiving federal dollars. So they can file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights under a Title VI violation at the Department of Education, and I would encourage them to do that, because it is time for this administration and all of these appointees to step up and follow federal code.
You know, for me, there's a moral answer to this and a spiritual answer as well. You know, these folks talked about the legal answers, but I certainly am concerned about their mental health and their spiritual health. I think it's real important that they gather together as a group and have some professionals in the room to work through some of the challenges that they've been through here. I think it's important that they're talking to their parents and to their rabbis about what is the spiritual lesson here. And I've been told it's a great honor to be persecuted because of your faith. And I just want to encourage them to stick to their faith, that God will be with them. And they're doing the right thing. And we're going to do everything we can to stand beside them and make sure that they have this opportunity. Remember, you know, people that founded this country came here because they were persecuted because of their faith. That's why they came here. And here we're repeating history again, all in the wrong. So we're going to stand beside them. It's a moment of character building for them as well. But certainly don't put themselves in harm's way. Thanks.
And on that uplifting note.
Yeah.
Very good.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.